it's very hard to understand. There's something like 5,000 gene therapy trials going on. So a person trying to invest in that area, it's very difficult. So the fact if you can kind of tell a clear story with clear proof of concept, clearly, I think that you can get investors interested in the sector, and that's what we're going to see in 2025, I believe.
Hello, you're watching Proactive. I'm joined by Solvonis Therapeutics Chairman Dennis Purcell. Dennis, very good to speak with you again. Could we start by chatting about what's driving the spate of mergers and acquisitions in the neuropsych CNS space in North America?
Sure, Stephen, and nice to see you again. Also, we're seeing a big change in the whole life sciences field. In the last number of years, we've seen the industry focus a lot on rare diseases and precision oncology and somewhat smaller types of populations that are focused on very acute kinds of diseases or rare diseases in many cases, and got away from our roots a little bit, which is really to work on diseases that affect large swaths of the population. We saw what biotechnology and life sciences could do during the COVID era when it really rose to the occasion on a worldwide basis in terms of the vaccines. And one of the areas that has been very underserved over the last couple decades in life sciences, or in biotech, I should say, has been the whole neuro space. And what we're seeing is that the large pharma companies have now started to show interest in spending a lot of money to develop therapies for very untreatable diseases in the past, whether it be depression or addiction or things like that. And consequently, we're starting to see more acquisitions in the neurospace actually than we have seen in other spaces of the life sciences sector. So I think that we're starting to see this M&A happen, which in turn is going to help more venture capital happen, because venture capitalists, in order to get a return, either have to have a kind of an M&A or merger kind of event or initial public offering. And the more of those we see, the more venture activity we're going to see. And we actually have started to see that with more startup companies focused on the neuro space as well as the big pharmas. So I think we're entering into a new era here of treating more prevalent, widespread diseases, and neuro is certainly at the forefront of that.
Dennis, could you give us some examples of M&A in big biopharma, perhaps targeting those smaller companies?
Sure. Toward the end of last year, Stephen, Pfizer had a drug approved for schizophrenia, which and prior to that, a few months before that, they'd acquired a company called Karuna, which was a small biotech. And the interesting thing about that was that it was the first Karuna got approved, or Pfizer and Karuna got approved for the first schizophrenia drug in over 70 years. And Pfizer ended up paying $14 billion for Karuna, and then got the approval. And so that's how Pfizer decided to get into the neuro space. Just recently, at the recent JP Morgan conference, Eli Lilly announced an acquisition of a company called Intra-Cellular Therapeutics that treats major depressive disorder. And they have a drug called Luma, and that was another $9 billion acquisition. So two very large acquisitions that we've seen just in the last couple of months. And then we're seeing some creative things happen. So, for example, in the psychiatric space, a big pharma called AbbVie has an option for some of the assets of a small company called Gilgamesh, a private company. So we're starting to see the big pharmas now start to either outright acquire these small biotechs or do licensing deals or option deals with them. So particularly in the last half of the year, we've seen much pickup in activity there. And what big pharma likes are de-risked assets, in the sense that across the board in life sciences or in biotech, what we're finding is that in the merger and acquisition world, the more de-risked an asset is, the more interested the big pharma is. And when I say de-risk, that means showing some kind of proof of concept, showing some kind of effect in humans that it works. Anything that kind of is not just very early stage or very seed series or Series A. So the biotech industry is working very hard to de-risk some of these assets, and if so, I think there's going to be an active market either for acquirers to acquire these assets or the public markets to actually get more interested in neuro. The public markets have not been as interested in neuroscience in the past decade or so because there's been so much to pick from in terms of rare diseases and precision oncology and things like this. And the neuroscience up until now has been somewhat difficult. Another thing that's happened very recently toward the end of the years is that we now have three compounds that are on the verge of possibly getting approval for Huntington's disease, terrible disease, and we've had no therapies for Huntington's disease in decades, and now all of a sudden we have three that are on the horizon. So there's a lot of hope for Huntington's patients too. So almost anywhere you look, you're starting to see small companies attack these big problems and attack them well. We're seeing some good data coming out of it for addiction and the like. So we're pretty optimistic, and I think we're pretty optimistic. I'm pretty optimistic also about the future in the psychedelic space. There was a setback last year for a company called Lykos, but that was unrelated to the compound itself and more to the trial design and things like that. But this year we're going to see a number of substantial readouts of clinical trials for companies that are in the psychedelic space, whether it be ketamine or psilocybin or things like that. So there's going to be a lot of activity this year. So it'll be in the forefront of people's minds as we go through 2025.
So you do see this consolidation in the markets as healthy, Dennis?
I do. We have tripled, Stephen, the number of life sciences companies in the last decade or so, from about 2,000 to 6,000. And life sciences developing a drug is very expensive. And to the extent that we don't duplicate our efforts and we somehow can combine our efforts in an era of scarce resources, I think that's a good thing. So I think that it's the more mass that a company has, if you will, the more quote unquote shots on goal, the better it is. So I think the consolidation is going to continue and will be healthy. And I suspect we'll also see some consolidation, not only with big pharma buying small biotech companies, but I suspect we're going to see some consolidation with two smaller biotechs merging with each other and creating a larger one, so that there'll be some economies of scale in terms of overhead and administration and things like that. And as I say, in an era of scarce resources, we've had a tough couple of years for fundraising. That kind of consolidation, I think, will be very welcome. And I think it'll be welcomed by investors too. I think investors like to see rationality and consolidation and things like that. Sometimes, particularly in the cancer field, for example, or the gene therapy field, I'll take as an aside. It's very hard to understand. There's something like 5,000 gene therapy trials going on. So a person trying to invest in that area, it's very difficult. So the fact, if you can kind of tell a clear story with clear proof of concept, clearly, I think that you can get investors interested in the sector. And that's what we're going to see in 2025, I believe.
Dennis, thanks as always for your insights. It's been great speaking with you.
Thank you, Stephen. Have a nice day.
That's Solvonis Therapeutics Chairman Dennis Purcell.